There you go.
All right. Good evening. My name is Phillip Wilder, and I'm an assistant professor in literacy at Clemson University. And it's my pleasure again to host the April 2015 edition of the LRA's Research to Practice show, which is the organization's effort to bring the work and expertise of literacy researchers into practice so that we can help practitioners translate research into practice. And I'm really excited about this show tonight. It's a show that over the last year and a half, the producers and I have talked about having before, and we're finally at this moment. So the focus of tonight's show is on the doctoral students' experience and the ways, not just that the organization can support doctoral students, but how we can recognize the expertise and really use that expertise to make a difference for teachers and students. So I'd like to go ahead and begin by asking our wonderful panel this evening to introduce themselves, starting with Jaye. And if you want to take 20 to 30 seconds to talk about your background and current program or the current position you're in, if you're no longer a grad student, that would be wonderful.
Sure. I'm Jaye Theil, and I did my doctoral work at the University of Georgia. And I have since graduated, and I'm finishing my first year here at the University of Tennessee, where I work in early childhood education. So I do a little bit of teaching there, and then also the early childhood literacy work here. Oh.
Wonderful. Jennifer?
Hello, thank you so much for the invite tonight. My name is Jennifer Nigh, and I'm a doctoral student in curriculum and instruction with a focus on literacy here at Kent State, Ohio. And I'm really excited to be here. I'm moving into my comps, so as of next week, I will have completed my coursework. So really excited to move into the next phase.
Wonderful. That's a great step. A little nerve-wracking for me. It may not be as much for you, but
well, certainly.
Sarah? All right, Sarah, you're up. Can you hear us?
There we go. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, so I am just about finished with my coursework, actually, as of this week. I'm getting ready for my quals, and my degree's in English education, but they let me play with the literacy people. And I'm getting ready to do my proposal this summer.
Great. And you're at
Syracuse University.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for joining us. Tiffany?
Hi, so I'm Tiffany Nyachae, and I'm here representing the leadership team for the Doctoral Student Innovative Community Group. I am the assistant co-chair, and I'm a second-year doctoral student in the Reading Education Program in the Department of Learning and Instruction at the University at Buffalo, in Buffalo, New York. And my advisor is Dr. Fenice Boyd. And I was a teacher for a little bit, and so I decided to come back, and I'm finishing up my coursework as well, and we take a research analysis exam. I've already taken that, and so I start working on my dissertation proposal this entire summer, and I hope to defend that in the fall. Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, great to have you. It's, as some of you were talking about the different hoops to jump through. I'm starting to break out in a little cold sweat remembering it, but you're all going to do really, really well. So the show tonight is going to have 3 different segments. Each segment will have about 20 minutes. The first segment is where we're going to kind of frame and contextualize the doctoral students' experience. The second segment, Jaye has agreed to talk about her dissertation research, which this past year at LRA won the LRA Outstanding Student Research Award. And looking forward to that conversation. And the third part is I would like each of your perspectives on how the organization can support the doctoral student development and growth and learning through this process. So those are the 3 different segments, and we'll have an informal conversation through all 3 of those. But I will just kind of throw out some questions to frame and guide our discussion. So the first thing I'm curious about is if you all could talk about your decision to pursue research in literacy education and the impetus for that.
Well, I'll jump in. Mine is a little bit different. I actually spent a long time in the K-12 world. I was a first grade teacher and a second grade teacher and a literacy specialist. And when I was finishing up my master's degree, the university that I finished my master's degree at asked me to come and adjunct. So I was like, sure, why not? Summertime, I'll go ahead and do an adjunct course. And one course led into more courses and more courses, and I realized how much I really loved working at this level. I had done professional development, and I had done a lot of conferences, but it was just a different environment, and that kind of pushed me into my doctoral studies with the thinking that I might want to someday end up full-time in that type of environment. I also thought, what better to do it in than literacy? I come from first grade teacher, so literacy encompassed our life. My own children influenced that. I have personal beliefs about literacy, and just the belief that literacy is the cornerstone to all of our knowledge. So I can continue to stand out, hopefully, from that, but that is the foundation. So that kind of brought me to where I am at this point.
Yeah, great.
Okay, well, I'll jump in.
Okay.
Well, I also was a teacher, well, a 7th and 8th grade social studies teacher, actually, for about 6 years, and I was an English teacher for in 7th and 8th grade for 1 year, and also certified as a literacy specialist, but I didn't really get an opportunity to really do that work. And the school that I taught at was a workshop school, so we had every subject was really reading and writing workshop in every subject. And I really became very frustrated with how many of my students were, in spite of all this work we were doing, and they were still reading below grade level. And not just on standardized tests, but also in our regular assessments that we were doing, our reading assessments that we were doing. And I just saw it really just discourage them from enjoying reading. And I loved reading, and I just didn't understand why they didn't love reading. No, I loved to read, and I wanted students to read. And we, as a school, rallied around reading a lot as a school. And I just wanted to go back and do some reading and rethinking just about literacy, period, just to make it better for students.
Yeah, it seems like it's similar to what Jennifer was saying, and I can relate as well in that, you know, I started taking classes because there was natural inquiry about students and students that struggle or their literate practices, and before I know it, I'm in the doctoral program and I'm taking classes. I'm finding classes that are even more interesting, and I'm in it before I know it. But that natural inquiry seems to be one theme that lots of us gravitate towards.
I think that drive for change is there too. Just as Tiffany was saying, she saw something that wasn't right, and that kind of triggered a thought in my mind too. Yeah, that drive for change, that there might be some things that we're seeing that if we continue to move forward and have positions where we can be advocates for literacy and teaching and education, or whatever drives us in that way, then that's a good, that was a good reason to move towards this direction also, I think.
If I can pop in.
Yeah.
Before I'm interrupted by some kids. I was, and I still am, a high school English teacher. I've been teaching for 15 years and at 2 different schools, and I am still a teacher, and I've been doing my program part-time for about 4 years now. So I sort of came into this also by adjuncting first at the program where I did my master's degree, and I was just really interested in adolescent literacies and ways to really better help my students navigate all the different ways they have to they have to be literate. I'm really interested in how they do research, how we teach students information literacies in their different content areas. So that's what brought me, I guess, to this point. And it sounds like, as many of you, once you kind of get pulled in, you get sucked in, and then you're there. So that's what I've been doing.
But it sounds like you found a way to keep both feet in the classroom as well as doctoral work, and sometimes that's not easy.
No, it's not, but I think a lot of us do that. More of us do that than maybe we all realize, especially if we're coming into this in our 30s, and sometimes we have extra people with us, you know, where we have kids, and yeah, it's certainly, it might be a different portrait of what doc students are now, and it's nice to hear some of the organizations we're part of have space for that, because that's becoming, I think, increasingly significant, especially for teachers in education programs, because a lot of us come to this still wanting to be in the field.
Yeah.
Had a certain amount of experience there.
That's right.
Your
thoughts?
Yeah, you know, when I think back, the thing that really made me move into working towards the doctorate was I felt like I needed something intellectually to be fed in some way as a teacher. I was seeing a lot of changes happen in the classroom that I wasn't comfortable with. And I wanted, I needed some language for that and some people for that. And I went into the Red Clay Writing Project one summer, which was with Jaye Theil, Bob Fetcho, and Stephanie Jones at the University of Georgia, and that kind of just changed my life a little bit. Well, a lot of it, because I'm here because of it. So I realized that there were ways to make change, and there was language for some of the things that I was feeling and doing, and there were people that were feeling the same things and wanted to do these same kind of practices in the classroom. I'm really thinking about social justice issues and that sort of thing. So I got this whole summer of being intellectually fed in the ways that I really needed to be fed as a teacher and didn't want to stop. So I continued and went into my doctoral program that way. And at first I was part-time, so I taught, and then I decided that I wanted to move into full-time, because my hope is that I could help teachers see themselves as intellectuals in the work that I was doing, so that they could go forward and make the changes that I wanted to see happen in classroom spaces.
Right. Yeah, very, very powerful. I'm wondering how each of you dealt with that tension of not wanting to leave the classroom, but also it sounds like each of you were wanting to advocate for kids, were wanting to advocate for teachers, wanted some intellectual growth like I did as well, and lots of us do. But how did you deal with that tension of am I leaving the classroom to do this? Because that's tough for a lot of people.
I'm just going to jump in. I don't think I've fully resolved that tension, to be honest. I still struggle with that. You know, I really do. I enjoy teaching. I know something happens when I'm with young people. It's just a different side of me comes out. And I actually had parents running into me when I was starting my first year of my doctoral program, like, Mrs. Nyachae, why did you leave? You taught my son, and his little brother was I'm like, I'm so sorry. You know, I'm like apologizing to parents, and it's just bad. But you know, I think one way that I've tried to deal with that is I've tried to sneak and find ways to still work with some kids. And even though I'm not in a classroom, and I know, and I do want to go to the university level, and I do want to teach college courses, I have used community organizations to try to still get a way to teach students to read great books and talk about great books with kids. And so I've done that. Also, I'm trying to, as I'm figuring out my dissertation proposal, I'm trying to figure out a way. I still want to do my research in real classrooms, and I feel like that's a way that I can still be a part of classrooms. And I love what Jay said about the whole intellectual space that I was needing, because sometimes, and it's not that they're bad, but it's just so much going on as a classroom teacher. You want to have these other conversations, and just like Jay said, you need the language around what you're seeing because you don't have that language. It's nice to be in this space where it's okay to talk that way and to get into those conversations, and but at the same time, I miss students, and I'm still a little young, so sometimes I feel like that I leave it prematurely, but I'm consoled when I find other ways to work with kids, with students, and that I had one of my teachers, one of my professors, Dr. Mary McVie, said, when you teach future teachers, you're affecting change. You're affecting the lives of many kids that come after that. So I'm trying to accept that and still sneak and find ways to teach kids.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like your answer is not to leave the classroom, right? To find ways to both things. And I think academia, more and more, we have university school partnerships that are one way to kind of bridge that traditional silo and to share the responsibility.
Everything Tiffany said is so true. That tension it's still ongoing. To myself, how be the researcher that I know I need to be while staying true to who I am as a person, but also as a teacher who taught first graders and who was a mom to three little kids. Sometimes those are very polarizing roles. So that identity is a real challenge, but I really like what Tiffany said about using that space for my research in those classrooms, and working with pre-service and in-service teachers to hopefully expand the knowledge and give voice to the people, and also learn more about literacy.
There we go. Can you hear me? All right.
Yes.
All right. I feel like the commercial there. Can you hear me now? But anyway, I was just curious about which research questions prompted you to decide to pursue a doctoral degree. This is to anyone, by the way, if you couldn't hear me earlier.
Okay, maybe I can go. I'm sorry, I stepped out for a minute. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I think I heard, when I came back in, I heard you talking about wanting to still be in the classroom, despite, I think Tiffany was talking about that, despite still pursuing this program, this degree, and thinking of going into teacher education. And I know that my research questions are really starting to align with that idea too. That I want to know, how can I continue to be dually positioned, and how can I not leave, how can I still practice teaching my high school students while at the same time helping to prepare future teachers? And I'm in New York State, so we are really implicated now with what that means in terms of preparing new teachers for the Common Core standards, in preparing them for completing their EdTPA for certification. So we're really kind of in the thick of all of that. And I think that in sort of prepping for all of that, I've been doing a lot of my reading in really teacher research, the practice of teacher research or practitioner inquiry, and looking at Cochran Smith and Lytle's work, and that's been really, I think, informing where I am this moment. Of course, where I am in my program, that changes week to week. So I'm still trying to wet all of that. But is that kind of, I don't know if that's what you were looking for.
No, that's great. I mean,
Yeah.
it seemed like when each of you were talking earlier, we got a sense of the different research interests and what prompted each of you to kind of pursue a doctoral degree. So wrapping up this first segment, what sort of challenges and exciting things about your programs are you encountering? You can go on either the challenge or the excitement direction.
I'll talk a little bit about some things I think were exciting about the program I went through at the University of Georgia. One is I think that one of the things that's being embraced really well there is a non-traditional format for dissertation. So they're really embracing this idea of not having the typical chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter work, but that you're really experimenting with form and doing some arts-based research practice through that. And like, for example, I created a special issue journal for my dissertation. So each
Very cool.
piece is a different article of that journal. Certainly, I'm not going to send the whole thing out to one place, but it's not like that. But it gives it. I think it gives people. It gives the students a way to reach an audience beyond the 3 or 4 people in their committee, which I think is really nice. And the fact that they encourage us to really just play around with different methods and see what we want to do, even explore our own, creating our own theories and that sort of thing. So for me, that was really exciting work to be able to not be bounded up and just right.
Yeah.
I can go next.
Yeah.
What's exciting about my program is that I feel like I'm listened to and I'm valued, and I feel like the faculty in my program, in the literacy program at my school, work together to tailor programs based on the goals of each student. Yeah. And they really do that in a thoughtful way, and I really appreciate that, because I came here with an idea, want to change the world, and and they let me they let me feel that. They didn't rain on my parade, and they're always just available for critical conversations. I feel when I need to think through some things, I can go to any one of my faculty members in my program and kind of just have these conversations where I'm trying to think through where do I want to go and all of this. But mostly I really appreciate how thoughtful they are in tailoring our programs individually for each of us. Because I kind of knowing what I wanted to do, and then realizing I didn't know what I wanted to do. But anyway, they worked with me, and it's exciting, and it's just the support and the encouragement that you receive, because everybody doesn't get that. So I'm very appreciative of the support that when I go to conferences, I'm like, oh, really? But I'm very thankful that I'm having a great experience.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's not only just a as Jaye was talking, but it's personal.
Yeah, I think the same thing too. Everybody on the faculty, but specifically my advisors, have given me a space. And to preface that, I hear that a lot of people come in knowing exactly what they want to do. They have that research question. I was the complete opposite. I came in with no understanding of what I wanted to do other than literacy, and I've been given that space to be eclectic. I've gotten to the point where that eclectic part of me had to stop, and we had to get a little bit more defined. But I was able to explore, I was able to research, I was able to investigate areas that I thought I might be interested in until I was able to funnel down to my exact interest. And then once I found that interest, I was embraced in coming into research projects and publishing and presenting with my advisors and faculty members. So just that welcoming and that open arms to have this journey be my own has truly been a blessing.
Yeah.
I've had a similar experience. My program has been very, very supportive of me. I mean, we're a very small department within our school, and I mean, I hear horror stories about other programs, like other schools within our university, and I mean, I sit with my advisor every week, and she helps me go over sort of direction for my program, and I've never really felt as if what I wanted to do with my work wasn't an option. There is so much support in helping me figure out, first of all, like you said, Jennifer, figure out what it was I wanted to do, and then how to make that happen, as opposed to becoming sort of like a carbon copy of my professors and the people in my department. And that's been nice. I think that if it wasn't like that, then I don't think I would have made it through this. I don't think I could. This is too difficult, the work to do. If it were more like what I hear in other schools, other disciplines on campus, and you hear the horror stories of the doc student who only sees her advisor once a semester. I mean, there's no way I could have done that, especially, again, like some of us are living in two worlds. We're in our classrooms. We are doing this part-time or full-time. There's just no way. So I have been, I mean, I've wanted to quit like probably a couple times each semester. And but they don't let me. They sort of talk me down and walk me through it. And I'm really grateful for that, because I was a little worried I wouldn't make it this far. So I know what you're all talking about.
It's easy to get disillusioned, for sure. As someone who was full-time, then part-time, then full-time, and finally Mark Dressman said, okay, it's been 11 years, so let's get cranking here. Because I wanted to stay in that classroom, in that school context. So I think you guys you're really providing a wonderful roadmap of the ways to be responsive and supportive, and I like Jay's mentioning of the flexibility of the actual writing of the dissertation. But what are some of the most pressing challenges that you encountered or are encountered that contribute to that sort of maybe disillusionment or that anxiety that we have all experienced?
I think balance, and it's a little bit more personal. I work full-time. I did get to do the doctoral studies for a couple years as a GA. But then I went back to full-time work and 3 children and a husband and a house, and it's that balance. And that has been probably the biggest challenge, because on the school end, everything has been phenomenally supportive, and on the personal end, the same thing, but just making it all work within a 24-hour period of time, it's a challenge, and I think it's something that I wasn't aware of before I came into my doctoral studies. And I think if I'm ever mentoring anybody into that decision, I would want to be really real about that challenge, because it is. Your family gives up a lot, your friends give up a lot, possibly your work gives up time. There's a lot that plays into that decision to become a doctoral student. It's not a little piece of your life, it's a big piece of your life.
And it's easy to get caught up in the looking at the new gold object and getting distracted and, oh, I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do that, and balance is certainly tough.
I think another challenge is I see it with me and I see it with other doctoral students, but I'm getting it because I've got is getting doctoral students to realize the value of going to conferences and understanding how you need to kind of be preparing yourself for your career once you graduate. while you're a student,
Mm-hmm.
and how to do that, how to even just get your foot in the door into the arena that you want to get into. And I also think, so in terms of networking and conferences, going to conferences, making sacrifices and going to conferences, and that's if you want to go, because you don't have to. Everyone who gets a PhD doesn't want to go to the university level, but if you do,
Right.
what are some avenues that, as a doctoral student, that you can manage, that you can try to get published, or how can you take papers that you're writing for classes and try to find ways to publish those so that you're getting out there. How do you navigate conferences? I think for me, when I went to my first research conference, that's when I saw the bigger picture and I understood, even though I always knew, I knew a PhD, okay, yes, I can get this, I'm going to learn, I'm going to change education, and I'm going to get a job as a professor. But I think that when you go to a conference, I don't know, it just helped me to understand this whole world at a different level.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't think that all doctoral students are getting that message, or they'll just be like, and it's not their fault. They just, I just think we could do, that's a challenge to get people to see how this all matters and how it connects based on your career goal. So if that's your career goal, if that's where you want to go.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's just kind of, apprenticing them into the process.
I think Tiffany said it that if you come from the K-12 world, going to your first research conference is an eye-opening experience. And I am so glad that this is just another nugget of advice, is that the first time I ever went to a real, true research conference, LRA, I observed. And I'm so glad I did, because coming from K-12 world, I would have been think, pair, share with your neighbor and talk to your elbow partner, and totally not that environment. So certainly those conferences are just a phenomenal way to step your foot into the water in the world of academia.
Right. Well, why don't we transition from these challenges to Jaye's work that was awarded this past LRA, and I think perhaps we can then think about some ways to kind of ameliorate some of these challenges by looking at the process that she used to navigate the doctoral work. And so Jaye, I'm really wondering if you could just talk a little bit about your doctoral research itself and that process that you used to pursue that work.
Yeah, so I was similar in that I didn't know what I wanted to do when I went in. I had one commitment that I continue to have, and that's that I grew up in a working class, working poor family, so I understood the challenges and the deficit ideologies that often are placed on families and children from working class backgrounds. And so I knew I had a commitment to that, as well as literacy, because of how important literacies have been to me in my life. But other than that, I didn't know when I walked in the door what I wanted to do. And so, as you can imagine, one of the challenges that I've faced, and I still continue to face, is that this space is a middle class space. It's not a working class space, and so thinking about how I can make this space something that is more open to and thinks about social class sensitive teaching practices, which is a term that I've learned over time through my work. So when I knew I wanted to work with children in my dissertation work, and sometimes life gives you some serendipity, and at the same time, about the same time that I was going to do my dissertation work, my chair, Stephanie Jones, was given an opportunity to create this community center, which we call the clubhouse, and ends up that I got to help her develop this and that be part of my dissertation research. So I was focused on out-of-school literacies and what that means, and really trying to enter the intellectual lives of these children and families in this community, and see how I might think about the literacies that they are using in their community practice and in their play, and what that might mean. So my dissertation is titled Literacies, Materiality, and Working Class Lives, The Encounters with Muchness. Muchness is something I developed through this dissertation, which I probably won't focus on as much tonight because it's a theoretical framework that I was trying to build and make Phillip philosophy through this practice. But I really wanted to just work against deficit discourses. So when we came into the space,
just like a 5-second unpacking of muchness, like an elevator speech of
So this was actually tricky, and I don't know that I recommend this to everybody, but I had to kind of go through the work of doing the dissertation and then go back and develop what I thought the idea of muchness was, and then put muchness to work in my dissertation. So it was a lot of kind of backing up to go forward, if that makes sense. So I'm throwing that out there. It's not necessarily something that I recommend for the faint of heart. But basically, I see muchness as an intellectual fulfillment, or a moment of intellectual fullness that is effectual, that where someone is engaged in, wants to be continually engaged in something regardless of challenges, or and they find some kind of affinity for. It's not the same, for me, it's not the same as the flow, because it's not, typically with flow there's this natural affinity and work towards, and you don't see as much challenge, and it's usually, a lot of times I'm seeing it related to sports work, which is interesting. But I see this more of these moments where it's named muchness after the fact, so you don't really even know that you're in that work at the time, because it's so much about the embodiment of what you're doing. That's kind of a quick little snippet. But I'll give you some examples. So an example of that would be of me seeing this at work is children using big motions uninhibited by anything. They're not worried about their shirts coming up, or how their bodies look in this play, because they're so engaged in what they're doing. Other times, them taking things and getting their bodies into really small, crouched, uncomfortable places for long times to get a block placed just right. Seeing them, if something doesn't work the first time, not giving up, but to just continue working through that. And what I, in my dissertation, coined this idea of rapid prototyping literacies. So they're just kind of in this multimodal engagement of rapidly prototyping and reworking and rethinking and tinkering.
Like an immersion or a complete, like, even physical transformation into the literate practice, right?
Yeah.
So how did you, because I'm interested, as you're talking, I'm thinking about some of the questions that we're getting from the audience, as well as what we're talking in terms of balance and narrowing research focus. How did you not get lost within all of your thinking?
Well, I think at times you do get lost in all your thinking. Well, first off, I had a wonderful mentor. I have several mentors, that are helping me all the time. But my mentor was really great about when I have questions to say, okay, think about what this means for practice. Because for me, I mean, I use new materialisms to think about my work, which can be it's Deleuze and Broad, which is she's a physicist that's done some work, and so that stuff can be kind of muddled.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was always, how can I bring this back to practice so it matters in the classroom space, or how in space for children and families, and not just about being this abstractness, right?
Who's your mentor? Let's give a shout out to the mentor. Who's the mentor?
Yeah. Stephanie Jones at University of Georgia was my chair and mentor. But I'll also shout out to Mark Vogley and Chris Schulte, who were on my committee, and Jo Beth Allen, who was there for a while, but she retired. So all those people really helped me navigate a lot. So
what a great intellectual kind of support system that you had to allow the space to think, but also to sometimes we all need to be reined in a little. So it sounds like you had wonderful support there.
Yeah, and I think it's always, for me, going back to the commitments that I knew I had. So, for example, when we went into this space, one of the things that we really thought about, we built off children's geographies, and made some serious commitments to decolonizing practices. When you open up a community center of some sort, there's always this. You're always on the edge of doing violence to someone when you're in their community space. Right. And so that, to me, really kept me in check a lot, too, and what I was doing. So, for example, some of the commitments, 4 main practices that we really worked on was fluidity between the clubhouse and the community, fluidity from indoor and outdoor space, access to materials was always available, little adult intervention, or injecting ourselves in places where we intervene rather than let children become and do and make. And so I think all of those things put in the conditions for me to be able to really think about literacies differently in that space. So it wasn't just pencil paper literacy, but this real multimodal work, and what that means.
Right. Yeah, it's hitting me that here you are at a little bit further down the path than some of our audience members, panelists, and I'm wondering what sort of challenges you encountered along the dissertation path. How did you narrow down your project? Tiffany just typed for us. That's the question I had too. Like, how did you narrow this down?
How did I narrow it? I don't know that I think it just becomes. I think it's one of those things. So here's a good example. You write something and you write something and you think, oh, this is going to be the beginning of my work, and then someone has a heart to you and tells you this is not as good as you maybe think it is, right?
Humbling. Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, that happens, I think, to all of us at some point, right?
Routinely, in fact.
And so, and not in a way that was hurtful, but just really help you think through what that looks like. And I think through that process, it was very helpful for me. I was constantly writing and going back too, right? So
did your questions at your proposal, were they the same as what they ended up in your dissertation?
My proposal was completely different, actually. At the time of my proposal, I was going to go into a flea market space, actually, and work. And so it ends up that this is why I'm saying my trajectory was not necessarily the one I tell others to do. But I ended up going back after when this kind of serendipity happened. And honestly, the families that are in this community also go to that space. So to the flea market space. So
yeah, you got to pack flea markets. I'm fascinated here.
Yeah.
Tell us what you were thinking of flea markets. I'm intrigued.
Well, I was just interested in the work that the literacies that were happening within a flea market space. I saw a lot of, it's interesting because I see a lot of the same kind of practices in that flea market space as I would see in this community. So in the sense of the ways families interact with each other and let children take the lead rather than constantly keeping them under wraps and watch, and taking what we think about as getting rid of hazards so kids can take risks, right? So I see that in both of those practices a lot. But yeah, I really wanted to just kind of collect stories there of families and people who work there and that sort of thing. That came a little bit, that becomes a little complex for IRB.
Yeah.
They don't love it. They don't love that kind of work.
Not as predictable.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
But yet it's important because it's kind of the hidden literate practices that even participants don't always recognize, right?
Yeah.
And the knowledge that's there. Yeah, I remember my advisor telling me that if my questions at my proposal were the same during my actual data collection, that I'm not thinking hard enough.
Yeah.
And that they need to naturally shift. So it's nice to have, I think it's important to have that intellectual space there to say, especially if you're doing ethnographic work and qualitative case studies, that I'm the interpretive lens.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really, you kind of have to go with the flow in the sense of if you start out with these broad ideas of what your questions are going to be. Oh, I'm going to be looking for this, right? And then I think I began when I really started thinking about what my questions were going to be. I know one of the things that was difficult is I kept thinking I had to do something different every time. Like, okay, I did my comprehensive exams. Now I have to do this. Everything has to be different. And then when I made the connection that those things actually can
build together,
build together, it was a little easier.
Yeah.
Because I think Stephanie, who said to me, she was like, you did this really interesting idea about muchness in your comps, right? Why are you not thinking about that? And I was like, oh.
I don't know.
Exactly what I want. Like that's it. But certainly the question still shifted over. You don't know what you're going to get into until you get into it.
That's so well said, right? Is that we have to. I think there's value in respecting the process of our own thinking and our own growth and our own development. I'm also wondering how you saw yourself as a researcher and how that influenced not just the design, but your stance and your research itself.
Yeah. So I always say I situated myself almost as an ethnographer, and so because I was doing this post-qualitative inquiry where I was there for a year, and actually I still do work there, and we'll be there this summer. But I wasn't doing that traditional sit in the corner, take observational notes kind of work. I was really in there with kids, and I had to just kind of let go and just be a part of what was going on and do when children are making or playing. I have one of the things in my dissertation that actually will come out in language arts soon is about an instance on the playground where I was asked to be a part of this play work where they were working with superheroes, and how that became this, I just had to do it. I had to be in that. I couldn't just sit back and say, oh, I'm going to take notes about what you're doing, because then I didn't get the richness that I was looking for. So as a researcher, I think I really just had to dig in and not just be an observer, but be a participant myself in what was going on.
Yeah, that was a big concept that I got from Ann Dyson when I did my grad work at the University of Illinois in Champaign. It's hanging out in the space, right, and participating in the space, being in the space. Chris
Schulte calls it being present.
That's right. That's right. So what came out of your dissertation research that you're still pondering about?
Oh, wow. I think for me, one of the things that I'm pondering the most is, since I do work in this out-of-school literacy space, and we've made some very strong commitments to social class sensitive teaching, Reggio Emilia philosophies of education, and these critical children's geographies. You know, there are several things at play going on in this space that we committed to, and I'm wondering what happens in a classroom, in a traditional K-5 space, because that's where I work in, as elementary literacies. But what happens when we allow children to have access to all the materials in the room, and to see these, to open up writing workshop to be what I see as a writing studio, and that they're actually building and making, and as part of their storytelling, and making videos like Karen Woolman talks about and does. What does that look like in that space, and how do we make that happen? Because I think when we do that, I think when we can do this, when we start figuring out how to open that up, it levels the playing field for all people who come in. So it's not this perception of what, it's not a perception of they don't have these middle class literacies that we want them to have before they come to school, right? That typically get labeled that, I should say, but that we just, if we're looking at multimodal practices at large and realizing that sometimes is silent, and that work is very different than just pencil and paper work. One of the lines I say is, literacies are unfurled through our bodies, not wrapped up in notebooks. And so if we start seeing literacy that way in the classroom, how might that look? That's where I'm kind of.
It sounds like you're talking about a space where there's a multitude of muchness at play, right?
Yeah.
Where there's. Go ahead, please.
No, the other thing I'm really thinking about is, we ask student teachers and pre-service teachers to do all of these practices all the time, yet I'm not seeing them get those same practices given to them. So what does it mean when, so some of the work I've been doing this year is, okay, instead of writing reflections, what does it mean when I give you a provocation and you do visual verbal journals instead? Instead of writing up a case study, just what happens when a case study becomes pieces and multimodal in and of itself, so that I have pre-service teachers engaging in those same sorts of things, and that I want them to do with children. Right. So those are the two things that I'm working with right now.
I am really appreciative of your committee, who gave you the space to pursue this work, because I'm really intrigued after listening to you, and I wish we had another hour just to kind of talk about your thoughts and ponderings on muchness in these spaces, but I really appreciate you opening up your work and sharing that with us. I'd like to maybe open that up to the panel if there are other questions that we want to ask you about your dissertation process, or insights that anyone else had as we were listening to Jaye talk about her work. Otherwise, I want to use good wait time, of course, but otherwise, with our last 5 minutes or so, I certainly want to talk about the work of the Doctoral Student Innovative Community Group as well. So maybe why don't we switch to that group and talk about that? Maybe Tiffany can talk about that, and I think as we talk about the ways to support doctoral students, it might bring us right back around to Jaye's work as well. So Tiffany, would you like to speak to that group? What it is and how it can support doctoral students?
So I guess I'll tell you really quickly our mission. So the Doctoral Student Innovative Community Group, the mission is to facilitate doctoral students' development as researchers, scholars, and teachers. We want to encourage doctoral students to actually participate in the Literacy Research Association. We want to meet the unique needs of our students. We know that we can't meet every need, but try to meet those needs, and also support them in their professional growth, and create a collaborative community. Phil, can you tell me, I thought you asked me to answer a specific question. Can you repeat that?
Sure. So basically, I was just wondering if you could kind of give us an introduction to the group and how it tries to support doctorals. But what maybe talk about upcoming opportunities within the group.
Okay, so one big opportunity for LRA 2016 proposals that's coming up, that it actually passed already, but is the proposal mentoring program, which I found very helpful. I also participated in it, and what happens is we have faculty members, real faculty members, who sign up to support students, and they write their area of expertise. And so then we have students, doctoral students, fill out applications letting us know what they want to do a proposal on, and then we match them up with as best as we can, a faculty member that has a similar research interest, and so then the student can draft it out, and they actually get personalized feedback from a faculty member that's an expert in that area, close to it, and you can use that to help you to draft a strong proposal. I found it very, very helpful. I'm sure that other people, I heard from some of my colleagues here at the University of Buffalo that I encouraged them to take advantage of this opportunity, and they also found it helpful. So that's one way. Also, you can also write for the newsletter. That's I believe that's ongoing. So you can write for the newsletter from different perspectives, which is great because you get an opportunity to practice writing, which we always need to do that and write a lot. With LRA, but we support them, is you can become a reviewer for LRA, and that's also very helpful in learning how to write proposals and how to do research. And so those are the opportunities right now. Every year you can run for positions. You can run for different. You can be a part of the tech team, the historian, where you get to go around and take pictures of what's going on at LRA. There's always ways. There are a lot of opportunities to get plugged into this organization if you want to take a more active role. So,
right, so someone can get involved.
Yes.
Who do they contact?
Oh, who to contact? I'm like hearing the end of what you're saying. I'm sorry. You can contact me because I'm the third leader. So you can contact me or Kate. We're all on the website. On our website, I probably should put it on the chat. So I'll put our website on the chat. And Colleen, we're the co-chairs, and you can contact us any questions that you have. If you go to the website, it shows you all the different committees, everything. It gives you an overview of everything. But you can contact any of us to get more information if you want to get involved.
Great, and I participated in the mentoring this past year at Abington State, and it was a wonderful opportunity to learn from her. So I really encourage people to do that. So I want to thank our panelists for their participation this evening. 1 hour is not enough for this topic because there are all sorts of ideas in my head right now about things that we didn't get around to talking about. But I want to thank you for your perspective and the time, and I look forward to hearing you present at LRA for many years to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you for this opportunity, and it was wonderful hearing everybody's insights.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yep, thank you very much.
Thank you.